o'clock, and we'll call this meeting of the Planning Commission for November 2nd to order. And if we could get a roll call to determine a quorum, please.
Larry Chesney.
Present.
Sarah Chavilicek.
Here.
Francine Donchik.
Here.
Michael Flick.
Here.
Kate Nelson.
Here.
Larry Payton. I do not have on Zoom. And Pat Phillips.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. If, Mr. Flick, if you would lead the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Certainly. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Guzman, if we could get the ethics law, please.
With respect to any matter or any person coming before the commission today, number one, you've received a gift or loan. Number two, you have a pecuniary interest. Number three, you have a commitment in a private capacity, such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship. Or number four, you provided representation or counseling before an agency to a person or entity for compensation within the last year on a matter being considered. Then please disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. And furthermore, please abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it's clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Commissioners are also reminded that under the Planning Commission rules, if you've had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the commission today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lloyd, if we could have the appeal process, please.
Of course. Most decisions rendered by the Planning Commission are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Planning Commission and you want to appeal its action, you may do so in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is signed by the Planning Commission Chair and/or the Secretary of the Planning Commission, filed with the Secretary of the Planning Commission, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Next, we have public comment, and I'm just going to read the general statement. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the agenda. However, action may not be taken on any matter raised during this public comment period until the matter is specifically listed on an agenda as an action item. Comments are to be made to the Planning Commission as a whole. Ladies, do we have any public comment at this time?
Yes, I have C. Mark Newman.
All right, if I remove my mask while I talk? Thank you. My name is Mark Newman. I live at 845 Cloudy Court, Sun Valley, Nevada. I received a card that said tonight they were going to be on the agenda, the new Highland Village off of the Highland Ranch Road next to Highland Village. As the young lady over here took numerous things going through the thing, I couldn't get through all of the stuff on the computer. I'm not that very computer scabby. I would like, and one of the things I was going to ask tonight would that this agenda for the Highland Village be tabled after going through the meeting on a certain date. I have it. It was October the 20th at 5:30 p.m. at the Sun Valley Neighborhood Center. I spoke with the people that are building the development and also a gentleman by the name of Mark, M-A-R-C. And because Sun Valley does not have any cab at this time due to COVID and the replanning of the zoning, I would like this to be forwarded to the citizens of Sun Valley and in a cab meeting before it goes before the board for any voting so that we can thoroughly go through it with the Sun Valley residents to make sure that this is going to be planned and developed properly. One of the things they're asking for is that it be a high density, and within the Sun Valley development, I would like to see that it be a medium density, which is 3 houses per acre instead of 7 to 10. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Ladies, any other public comment, whether it be internal or on Zoom?
I have no more public comment in chambers.
I do have a hand raised via Zoom. Justin Norvik, I'm going to allow you to speak. If you could please unmute and state your first and last name for the record.
Okay, Justin Norvik.
You have the floor.
Hello, thank you. I'm a longtime Reno local, and I graduated from UNR in 2012 with a civil engineering degree. So I've been in the field for several years now, and while I was doing my job with Poker Jack Corp, I was traveling out to Red Rock Boulevard, Red Rock Road recently, and I noticed that a lot of the cars were speeding. And I know that the development plan is, you guys just approved a new subdivision. So I witnessed some of the large trucks kind of struggling to stay in their lane. And I was concerned about the safety of it, basically. There's nowhere for the pedestrians to go. You guys just approved the subdivision. I think it's Silver Knolls. I forget the name of it exactly. But you guys acknowledge in your North Valleys and your Spanish Springs traffic study that there's going to be a huge increase in, the population out there, and that there's not adequate infrastructure for the pedestrians. And I'm really worried that people are going to be speeding down that road, and people aren't going to have anywhere to go. The slopes are more than 2 to 1. It really it doesn't seem safe around Silver Lake specifically. There's curves, and there's really no 2-foot shoulders, which are supposed to be the minimum required out there. And it's like the first 5 miles of that road between the intersection and Moya Boulevard. So the traffic studies focused on Moya Boulevard and to the south, but that remaining 5 miles to the new subdivision, it's not being addressed. And it's most likely going to get ignored because it's a part of the 50 miles of Red Rock Road that is going to be paved all at once. My concern is that this 5 miles of road is going to be heavily traveled. It's not adequate infrastructure. Is there any way we could increase the regional road impact fee to accommodate for this sooner? Because it seems inappropriate that it's going to be put off for decades while we develop it and the infrastructure is not there.
All right, thank you. Ladies, any other public comment at this time?
I have no further public comment.
Hearing no further public comment, we'll close public comment, move on to item 6, approval of the November 2nd, 2021 agenda for tonight. I'll join a motion for approval.
Patricia Phillips.
So move.
Oh, is there a
I'm
second?
sorry, Madam Chair. Did you want to make any changes to the agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I apologize. Before we approve the agenda for tonight, we've been requested to make a motion to move item C, the amended of conditions case number WAC 210006, a dog's life, up to the first agenda item. So if we could get a motion to approve
I'm sorry,
with
Ms.
that change?
Ms. Doncheck, I'm sorry, was that before A or was it right after B that you wanted to move?
It's the first item would be before A.
Okay, so it would go CAB or would it be ACB?
CAB.
CAB, okay, thank you for the clarification.
I move to
Chair
approve the
Doncheck.
agenda with the change to move item C first and go CAB.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Ms.
Chair,
Nelson.
Chair Doncheck,
Yes, Vice Chair Travilcik.
I will move to approve the agenda with those changes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a first and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Okay, so we have approval of the agenda for tonight with the move. Before we get to that, into the agenda, can we get approval of the October 5th, 2021 draft minutes, please?
Commissioner Chesney moved to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Chesney. Do we have a second?
Pat Phillips, second.
Thank you, Pat. We have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Any changes, any adjustments? Hearing none. All of those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I abstain, since I wasn't here.
We have one abstention for Mr. Flick, as he was not present at the meeting. Thank you. Next, we move on to public hearings, and as we said, we have approved to move to item C. Mr. Lloyd, if you would read into the record, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item 8C, is an amendment of conditions, case number WAC 21-0006, a dog's life extension for possible action, for hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an amendment of conditions for WSUP 19-0030, a dog's life SUP, for an extension of time of 2 years for a proposed commercial kennel. The project site will consist of a 20,000 square foot building, associated landscaping and parking. The building will contain 15,000 square feet of space for boarding and doggy daycare, 2,000 square feet for retail space, and 3,000 square feet for contractor's office. Representing Washoe County in this matter is planner Chris Bronzik.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Good evening. We are looking at WAC 21-0006. This is a dog's life SUP. Lacey. So the original request came before the Planning Commission on February 4th, 2020. This request was approved, and it was for a special use permit for a commercial kennel within the Spanish Springs area plan. Under the Spanish Springs area plan, a commercial kennel is one required to go to a Planning Commission for a special use permit approval. It's also limited to industrial regulatory zone and 2.5 acre minimum lot size. The subject parcel that this project is for is industrial zoned and is 2.75 acres. It's located at the corner of Ingenuity and Pyramid Highway. So there are no changes specific to the special use permit. It is still located in the Spanish Springs Business Park. The design is still the same. They're still having a construction sales and services, which is allowed by right, retail, which is allowed by right, and grooming and pet stores use type, which is also allowed by right. This is just a layout of what was proposed in 2020. The primary reason for this coming before you is the applicant is requesting a 2-year extension of time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of this new review, Washoe County planning staff has provided 2 additional conditions, and Washoe County's Air Quality Division has provided a new condition as well. It should be noted that it has generally been the practice for Washoe County to grant most projects the first requested extension of time, and staff does support the request. I've provided a possible motion, and staff is recommending approval with conditions. I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any questions from the board at this point?
Chair Donchek?
Yes, Mr. Vilcek.
Thank you. So if you could tell us why why the county added additional conditions? Is it just because things have changed in 2 years, or why are we subjecting the applicant to additional reviews and conditions?
Certainly. So the one condition that was provided from air quality was just a statement that air quality permits are required once they start breaking ground. For some reason, it may have been missed in the original review process. With planning's conditions, the primary condition, the two conditions that we provided was when they submit their permits, all of the conditions from their original SUP are still applicable, and they need to submit action order for this amendment of conditions as well as their original. Additionally, the amendment of the condition that was amended was the time frame. The original condition limited them to 2 years, which would have expired in February 2022. So we have given them, the condition reads for a 2-year extension from today's date, if a decision is made.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions at this time? Is there an applicant present that would like to do a presentation at this time?
Good evening, everybody. Ian Meyer with CFA, the consultant for the project. I'm joined here today with Dave Snellgrove, also with CFA, and the applicant is online through Zoom, Mr. Rich Wilson. We would like to start off by saying we agree with staff for their, we agree with their approval of with their motion, and we agree to the revised conditions for the project. Pretty straightforward. As for the project, COVID has impacted us all in one way or another, as we all are still very much involved in our day-to-day lives, and this is just another one of those aspects. So just a simple extension is all we're looking for, and if you have any questions, we're here to answer any questions. I do believe Rich is on Zoom and would like to make public comment as well.
Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time of the applicant? All right, thank you. At this time, we open it up to public comment. Is there any public comment for this item?
I have no public comment in chambers.
I have no hands raised via Zoom. I don't have a Rich logged in. I do have a CCR2. So if that's Rich and you would like to speak, please raise your hand via Zoom. Perfect. I'm going to allow him to speak.
Good evening, board. You're gonna have to excuse me. My entire household is battling COVID. I would just like to say that, you know, we've been on this journey for quite some time, and with the pandemic hitting us about the worst possible time, an extension would be greatly appreciated. This has been our dream for a long time, and we've worked extremely hard, my wife and myself, along with CFA and our consultants, to make this dream a reality. And, you know, with the way that the COVID has hit everyone, I believe that this extension is going to be exactly what we need to attain our dream, and we fully intend to press forward with this as quickly as possible. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ladies, any other public comment?
I have no other hands raised via Zoom.
All right, thank you. We'll bring this back to the commission. Are there any questions from the commission for staff, the applicant, or the gentleman that spoke on public comment? Hearing none, I will bring it back. I will close the public hearing at this time. If there's no further discussion, I would move for a call for a motion. Yes, Commissioner Flick.
Yes, I'd move that after giving considerable reasoning to the information contained, all right, I better use that one. Okay, I move that after giving consideration.
No, I'm sorry. Do we need to rephrase this a little with the new amendments that are just brought in, or are they in this?
Chris, maybe you could address that. Are the amendments in Exhibit A? That's part of the motion.
Yes, the amended conditions are Exhibit A.
Okay, then go ahead.
So it'd be fine.
Okay, third time's a charm. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission approve amendment of conditions, case number WAC 21-0006 for A Dog's Life, with the amended conditions included as Exhibit A to this matter, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30.
Commissioner Chesney, second.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a first and a second on this motion. Any further discussion? If not,
Phillips, I second the motion.
I think Commissioner Chesney beat you to it. It just didn't come across loud. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, very much. Next item on the agenda, we will be going back to item 8A. At this point, 8A will be heard by the Washoe County Planning Commission, who will simultaneously also convene as the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, CIAC, including CIAC member Kenneth Crater for this item only. So, Mr. Lloyd, if you could read this into the record, please.
For possible action pursuant to NRS 278B.150 and Washoe County Code 110.706.05 to recommend approval to the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners to adopt the 7th edition of the Regional Road Impact Fee General Administration Manual, Riff, Capital Improvement Program, and the revised fees for unincorporated Washoe County. The RIF is an NRS Chapter 278B impact fee designed to generate revenue for the construction of regional roads and associated improvements in the community, and has been periodically amended upon the adoption of the Regional Transportation Commission of updated versions of the GAM, CIP, and fees. The amount of the fees is based on the most recent version of the CIP in effect and is calculated according to the formula set forth in the GAM. Is approved, if approved, authorize the chair of the Planning Commission on behalf of the CIAC to sign a resolution to that effect that also recommends the adoption of any necessary ordinances and to implement these amendments. Representing in this matter, RTC, and I apologize, I don't have your name.
It's all good. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Dale Keller, Engineering Manager with the RTC of Washoe County. So tonight, that was a mouthful. So tonight, we'll try to simplify that a little bit and discuss the Regional Road Impact Fee, or RIF, 7th edition update. So as a refresher, and before we jump into what this update includes, I just want to talk about what is a Regional Road Impact Fee. So it is a funding tool for collecting the cost of new developments, capacity demands on our regional roads. So for example, as you see on the screen, a new development comes online. In this case, Washoe County then collects the fees through the building permit process. Those funds are then transferred to the RTC, and then the RTC then goes ahead and uses those funds to build improvements to our regional road and increase capacity. So the program has its advantages and its limitations. Some of the advantages is the development's a way to pay its fair share. It's also viewed as an equitable system supported by the community. As for the limitations, it must be used on capacity improvements. So impact fees cannot be used for operating costs, maintenance costs, or non-capacity improvements. As mentioned, the program is governed by NRS 278B, which allows local governments to enact local impact fee ordinances. And to administer this program, each agency, so that's Washoe County, City of Reno, City of Sparks, and the RTC, entered into a 4-way interlocal cooperative agreement to outlining those roles and responsibilities. And as also mentioned, we are governed by 2 aspects of that, 2 components. The first is the capital improvement plan, which describes the methodology to develop our impact fee. And the last one on the bullet point here is the General Administrative Manual, or GAM, that shows the guidelines and procedures to run the program. So why are we doing a RIF update now? So in accordance to those provisions of that interlocal cooperative agreement, we're responsible to do this periodic review updates. And this review process was initiated by the approval of the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, our long-term vision of the region. And so the RIF program uses this RTC's transportation planning efforts to define a list of capital improvements necessitated and attributed to new development within a 10-year window. So in addition, the 7th edition was developed through the Regional Road Impact Fee Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC, and that committee is comprised of local agency staff, as well as members of the planning commissions, representatives from the development community as well. And so now for over a year, the RIF TAC has provided guidance and input to this update since July of 2020. So this is a basic diagramming outlining the 3 main components of how we develop a RIF fee. And I'm gonna jump in and spend a little bit of time to show the backup and provide a little bit of detail of how we generate our fees. So the first step shown in red is the use of the known land use assumptions through TMRPA. So that's the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency, as all aware. So we use that to identify the type and where growth is planned to occur. Then step 2 in green is where the RTC planning effort comes in, where we use the RTC travel demand model to understanding where and when the cars are going, as well as then the regional transportation plan to understanding the capacity needs in our region. And the last thing in blue is where the RIF program comes. We determine the new development share the cost of these capacity improvements. And then finally, the last box shows the impact fee rates and fee schedule by individual development type. So I'm going to break this down, each of those steps, a little bit briefly, a little bit more in detail. I think it's important to provide some justification behind these steps. So the first one, back to step 1 in red, was using to estimate the VMT growth, which is vehicles mile travel over a 10-year period. We use the consensus forecast for population employment through the TMRPA's development model to help determine where and when growth will occur in the Truckee Meadows. And then step 2, through that RTC travel demand model, we convert the growth for vehicles mile travels, or VMT, to establish the measurements that create a link between supply, which is our capacity roadway, and the demand, which is the traffic generated by new development. Now, this process is taken a step further in that travel demand model to convert, to assign, each of the growth is then assigned to these different parcels or zones to determine where these trips are being generated at. So you'll see in the orange section, you see on the left side of your screen, the trips, somebody coming from the North Valleys all the way down to South Reno. And this is just one example of how we develop the trip distance on our regional roads. This process is then repeated between every zone there is, and the results are then aggregated to determine the average trip length for the north and south service areas. So the travel demand model calculates growth, and the last part of the equation that we're going to get to is the cost part of it. And the RTP identifies, I'm going to take a step back, I jumped a slide. So we talked about, there's 2 different sizes I alluded to. There's a north service area as well as a south service area. And so we have to show a rational nexus where this money can be collected and then spent towards. So our program is divided into 2 different service areas. Did I skip ahead a slide? That's what happened. So let me jump back to the RTP. So we use the first 10 years of the RTP to determine where the capacity improvements are determined at. So you'll see on the left side, that's the planned projects in the RTP from the 2021 to 2025 projects, and then also on the right, the 2026 to 2030 projects. I know in public comment, one question was about Red Rock. Red Rock is included in our next 10-year window for capacity improvements. So now with all this input, we get to this last slide about determining the net cost per service unit. So we determine the capacity growth and what the RIF share for the next 10 years is over $132 million. We divide that appropriate that between where the growth is going to occur between the north and south benefit districts. And when you get to the bottom side, you get your dollars per VMT per RIF share. Now, the last one, when we get the dollars per VMT, we're able to establish our RIF schedule for the designated land use. This slide highlights for the residential as well as industrial use. And in the far right of the column, you see the difference between the 7th and 6th edition. This schedule is also shown in your agenda packet. And here's the remaining development types between commercial and office and other services. So to summarize, based on what the TMRPA as well as our travel demand model updates show is that we are traveling further. In return, the number of VMTs or miles of vehicles mile of travel has also increased. The bullet point 2 is talk about the Riff CIP projects. Now that reflects our long-term vision of the region through the 2050 RTP. And we are seeing more growth occurring in the North Benefit District than the South. Now overall, the fees have roughly increased 1% for each of the different land development uses. However, the last slide, and I think it's important to point out, as we talked about, the fee increase for single unit residential land use was greater than the majority of the other land uses, roughly about 6% in the north and 5% in the south. This increase was directly related to the total number of vehicles in Washoe County. And we get this information from the U.S. Census Bureau and then from the 2019 American Community Survey. So that's a direct correlation to that increase of fees. So based on the action taken today and the recommendation taken today, we'll continue to work with staff to take this now to the Board of County Commissions. It has 2 readings for the City of Orange for adoption. This process is also being repeated through City of Reno and City of Sparks. Last week we met with City of Sparks Planning Commission or the CIAC, and then tomorrow we are presenting in front of City of Reno Planning Commission. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Are there any questions from the commission?
Good evening, and thank you for coming today. For the record, my name is Ken Crater, and I have several things I wanted to walk through. And just so you know, I'm very familiar with the Impact Fee program. Is that on? Okay. I was actually hired by the City of Reno to develop the first Impact Fee program for our community, which eventually then morphed into the Region Road Impact Fee program. So I spent several years developing that program for the city. So just a little background as to why I'm asking some of these questions. But my first question is in regards to the administrative manual and really talking about land uses. And just so the commission understands a little bit where I'm going here, a lot of the fee has to do with the trip generation manual. And the trip generation manual is developed by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which is really the worldwide authority on traffic and transportation. And when I first started out in traffic engineering, this was essentially the trip generation manual. It was a single volume. And you can see what it's morphed into now, 3 giant volumes plus a couple of other books for guidance. And basically what they found through the years is trip generation is dependent on a lot of different things, not just the type of land use, but the variables within that land use. For example, a warehouse building, you could look at the square footage of the warehouse building, you could look at the employees in the building, you could look at the number of acres. And so there's a lot to it to determine how much trip generation is generated by a various project. So I just thought it'd be important just to point out just how much detail the ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, has put into this trip generation manual and how important it is to this program. So first of all, on the residential uses, as of late, within the last several editions, townhouses and condominiums have basically been considered a multifamily use. And in fact, they're both called out in the multifamily residential land use category, and they're still put within the single family residential category. Basically, if there's 3 or more units, it's considered multifamily if it's an attached townhome or a condominium. And the trip generation is very clear that those uses generate the same number of trips as an apartment building. And I've actually had a couple of projects, or I brought this up to Julie Masterpool at RTC and folks at the City of Reno, City of Sparks, and they all agree. So I would like that to be clarified with the administrative manual that a townhouse or a condominium with 3 or more units is considered a multifamily residential unit and not a single family unit, just because if you're not generating that much traffic, right, you should be considered a multifamily residential unit. So that was my first point. And then second, dealing with industrial buildings, another thing that's happened in the last several years, is now we have these e-commerce fulfillment centers, and there's now a land use category in the trip generation manual. It's land use code 155, high cube fulfillment center warehouse. And for example, the Amazon facility out on Lemon Drive would clearly fit within this category. And ITE has found that these types of fulfillment centers generate about 4.7 times more traffic than a normal warehouse and distribution facility. So if an Amazon e-commerce facility is moving into this community, I feel strongly that they should pay the higher rate and not get the benefit of a typical warehouse distribution facility. And all you got to do is look in the parking lot and see that clearly they generate far more traffic. And so I think this should be added as an additional land use category within industrials, to add that land use code for 155 for the high cube fulfillment. I mean, it's a difference of 1.74 trips per 1,000 square feet versus 8.18 per 1,000 square feet. So it's a marked difference. Another land use category, and this really has to do with small businesses, and one of the points I want to make is I think RTC has tried to simplify the land use categories, and for good reason, because it's very difficult for the layperson to look at all these land use categories, and not to mention just that, but the staff that works on this. But another category that I think would be very beneficial is a veterinary clinic. Right now, veterinary clinics are grouped together with a medical dental office building, and my vet just opened his own small business, and he's still struggling. He's still not earning a salary. He's paying his staff and paying the bills, but a veterinary clinic generates far less traffic than a medical office building, to the tune of 21.5 trips per 1,000 square feet versus 34.8 for a medical office building. And I think we want to help our small businesses. And again, I just think we want to be fair. So I'd love to have RTC look at adding a veterinary clinic to the land use category. And there's a lot of data on veterinary clinics. It's got a high coefficient of variation. So I feel that that information is accurate, and that would be something, again, just beneficial to a small business. A vet doesn't make the same amount of money that a specialty physician does. And then the last category that I think we should look at is student housing. The Trip Generation Manual has also done a lot of research on student housing as of late. We've had a lot of student housing come into this community, and right now it's just lumped in with multifamily housing. And again, student housing, they found, generates a lot more traffic than an apartment building. And so again, these student housing complexes, they're very lucrative. I've been involved with them. They make a lot of money in these projects, so they ought to pay our community for the impacts they create with the traffic that they generate for those complexes. And then the last question I have relates to traffic report guidelines. And this has been something I've thought about through the years, but every entity in our area has their own guidelines for traffic. City of Sparks, City of Reno, Washoe County, they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. But there's also a requirement within the administrative manual for traffic studies, and it speaks to how many trips you generate. If you generate more than 100 peak hour trips, you have to at least look at an access and entry study for the project. If there's 200 or more, you have to do a full-blown study. But it seems to me it's time for the three different entities to basically make their requirements the same across the board. And I would love to see RTC drive that forward. It just makes it easier for everybody knowing what the rules are, and that way there's not confusion when somebody goes to the administrative manual and says, well, I'm in Sparks, their requirements are X, but RTC's requirements are Y. I just think in terms of simplification and making sure that we get what's most important is just a good traffic study to understand the impact. So I would love to see RTC work forward, work with the three different entities, and create the same exact standards across the board. I think that would be good for the development community as a whole. So those are my comments and questions, and thank you.
Mr. Keller, if you'd like.
Sure. So there's a lot of digest and breakdown, and if there's a certain question I can help answer, please stop me. So let's start on the different types of land uses. You made the comment about how to generate a simple way to administer the program. And so that's what we've done. And reviewed those different categories and understanding there are always going to be some type of exception to having maybe a veterinary clinic or one-offs, right? So in the administrative manual, there is ways to provide your own traffic studies, show you have less of impact than what your category that you're in, okay? So that's one way we can not make a great list where you're having 50 or 60 or the width of that book to determine what your trip generation is there for that. So the simplification, that was done on purpose, and the review of the different land uses was vetted through that Riff Technical Advisory Committee. We also talked about student housing, e-commerce, and the comment was, I believe, was related to that could have an additional impact than what was their currently category as, right? I think I can take that comment back, and as we go through the next update for the 8th edition, we can provide more granularity on those and making sure that they're paying their fair share. Because at the end of the day, that's what the program's about, is a way to capture the money for what their impacts are. And I want to reiterate why we're doing this update. So overall, as we work through the Riff Technical Advisory Committee, as we understand the program is working, what the purpose of this update was to reflect what was being done in the 2050 RTP. So we had to bring everything forward and making sure that we match. That's the reason we're moving forward. That yes, is there ways we can continue to improve this program? Yes, but the main purpose of this is making sure that our fees reflect the program we are going to deliver in the next 10 years.
Can I just ask one more question on that? I'm familiar with the independent fee calculation study and all that, but until those changes are made, I'd love to see more guidance from staff when a small business or a developer comes in like a vet to point them in the right direction, right? Because they don't know, and if they're not told, they're just going to pay the fee, and they're paying more than they should. So I think until those clarifications are made, it'd just be great to see, and I know staff's busy, there's a gazillion projects going on now, but it's a big deal for a lot of small businesses to come up with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in regional road impact fees for their own business. And so with that, I guess, with all the information in the trip generation manual, it's not hard, right, to say, hey, you only generate 50% of the trips, calculate the fee, and you're good to go. I'd hate to see, for example, a vet have to spend $10,000 to do an independent fee calculation study when there's already adequate information in the trip generation manual.
So I'm more than happy to work with you offline and talk about ways we can improve that process. And if there's something that how we develop our independent fee calculation that we can look through and support, I'm more than happy to work with you.
And I'd love to hear from other members, right? If you think I'm on base or off board or.
Are there any other commissioner questions?
Yes,
or
ma'am.
statement? Yes, Commissioner Fleck.
I think that's on. Yes, my question, and it sort of certainly ties in with you, I'm a little confused. The traffic impact fees that are collected as now, are they supposed to pay for all the future roads that, or the expansion of existing roads that the county or the jurisdiction is facing? Or are there other funding sources coming in to pay for this stuff? Because I don't see how that's going to do it.
Commissioner, great question. So by NRS, we have to take into account other funding sources before we start implementing that fee. So it is part of the funding source. It's not the entire source of funds, but what it is part of that equation. And what you see on the Riff share, we accounted for all the other funding sources being federal, state, and local gas tax to help make the funding formula.
So we have to basically use these funds, say like for matching funds, for a federal grant, or a state bond issue type thing?
I could maybe theorize why NRS is written that way. I think it was just to say we have to consider all the other funding sources that are collected besides just creating a larger impact fee or more of a share based on developers' impacts and other funding sources that we have in our bucket.
I certainly agree with you as far as making everybody pay their fair share, because we do need business, and it all starts out at small business. And if they can't get off the grounds because they're paying disproportionate fees versus the big guys coming in here and can write a check, it needs to be really cleared up.
And Commissioner, if I may, I have not come across that issue, and if that's not have raised to the level of understanding either from staff or from RTC staff, but we're more than happy to address that issue. As your example, your veterinarian, that's something we can work through.
Okay, and I guess my last one, how well does this work? I mean, it's so easy to get tangled up in the weeds, so to speak, as you read all of these statistics, and this goes to this entity, and this entity helps develop the plans or what have you. But, you know, we're experiencing a tremendous amount of growth. And do these plans give any credence to when the money's gonna be there?
It does, yes, sir. And so this is, I think we're very fortunate as a region to have this as another funding source, and we can focus this attention on capacity-related issues on our roadways. So it goes to direct correlation, it's directly, it doesn't also, we talked about operation costs, so that direct piece collected go to design and construction, and you see big projects like, we have a Sky Vista project that's gonna go out to widening starting next year. So there's a lot of these major projects that we're are funding through the Riff program.
So these fees are collected in a timely manner, but it's the other part of the money to build a major highway or what have you, or expand it, that's not available.
Correct, and by NRS too, there is a time limitation where we have to use these funds to spend. So we are unable to just hold them, store them away, and then use them 15 years later. I believe, don't quote me, it's a 10-year window that we have to spend this. So a lot of times it's first in, first out. So we are spending this money, roughly received anywhere between $5 to $7 million per year in RIF fees that come in. So we do use that money, and we see that on major projects, also spot projects that we've been using them for as well. And we start chipping away what's on the list. If you look at what's on our capital improvement list, we have a process that we allow flexibility in our program where we can use and spend this money and match local funds where we can.
I know there's a lot of parts of the county is drowning in cars trying to get from point A to point B, and it'd be nice to be able to try to make it move faster.
Question? Thank you, Commissioner Payton.
I have two questions, essentially. First of all, how often do you revise or study this and put out a request for changes? How long would people have to wait for these changes?
Commissioner, it'd be every 3 years that we go through and update our process. One thing I'd like to also note is we want consistency and to our development community understanding what our RIF fees are as well. So as the development comes online, that we have clear understanding what that fee would be. So there's kind of, if we change it so often, adds uncertainty what that RIF would be from year to year. So by doing that 3-year interval, it provides enough to incorporate different projects to come in and also follows the same planning processes of our long-term plan.
Okay, and my second question is a different vein of thinking about this. I was looking at the offsets that you have listed here, and I wanted to confirm that an offset for improvements must be available so that there's an offset eligible improvements. I think that's on page 41 of what we have. I just want to confirm that, you know, otherwise, who comes up with the money of the difference because there is an offset eligible cost?
Commissioner Phillips, great question. So part of our program, the developer has, if there's a project that's listed on our capital improvement plan and the developer's conditioned to go build part of that roadway, a regional road on our behalf or so forth, they are eligible for waivers. So they're not being taxed twice per se. So you have the ability to enter into an offset waiver agreement. We used about 2 or 3 now in Sparks. This used to be their old credit process. So yes, with the waivers there, a developer can use that on eligible regional road improvements for capacity.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Any other questions from the commission at this time?
Commissioner Chesney,
Yes, Commissioner Chesney.
I'd like to make a comment. I think Ken Crater has some really good points, and it would probably behoove, I sit on the Riff TAC committee right now, that as an engineer and a consultant that possibly Ken might be added to the Riff TAC committee, as there are other representatives from industry on it, so he can have more immediate input. Secondly, we all have to keep in mind that infrastructure lags growth severely historically. So if you collect $1 million today, you can't spend $1 million tomorrow, because by the time it gets through the system and works through the system, you're looking at a year or 2 years out. So nothing is immediate regarding these kinds of funds. They do have to be spent within the 10-year period. They're doing the best that they can, but then when you take projects, let's use an example, let's take 445 through Sparks, Pyramid Highway. The RTC's funds can't really provide the funding to do the improvements that are necessary, so they have to wait for state and federal funds, and that's quite a process. So we have to keep these sorts of things in mind, and we also have to make sure that the public understands that it's not like turning on a light switch. That's pretty much what I have to say. The Riff TAC committee has worked really hard with RTC. A lot of long meetings and conversations, a lot of controversy. It was all settled. This proposal is a good proposal, I believe, and I'm going to support it. Thank you. That's all my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Chesney. Any other commissioners' comments or questions? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Do we open this for public comment on, is there any public comment on this, ladies?
I have no public comment in chambers.
No.
And I have no hands raised via Zoom.
Hold on, there's somebody raising a hand back there. Does he wanna? Sir, when you're done, if you could complete an official form for the record for public comment, we'd appreciate it.
There should be somebody at the door to tell me that when I walked in. That failed. Okay. When it comes, this is my first time here. I've been up here in Nevada since 97.
Sir, can we get you to state your name for the record, please?
Sean Wensley.
Thank
I
you.
have my own little, what I call a micro business. I'm not just a, I do all the little home repair stuff, from a single wide mobile up to $1.5 million estates. I work for real estate agents. I live up on top of Sun Valley and moved up there over 5 years ago. And back in 97, when I came up here, I started working at the Northtown Home Depot, worked there for 7.5 years in electrical, trained by licensed electricians and everything. And then they all quit eventually, and then they flipped and changed and everything, and I eventually got out of there. I got my own home maintenance place now that I do. Anyway, in Sun Valley, it's a lot more stressful driving because there's so much traffic, is what everybody's saying, in the technical end of it and everything. And the one thing I noticed a few weeks back, going over Highland Ranch Parkway, the traffic is so bad in the morning, it's unbelievable. Our emergency personnel, police, firemen, or ambulances, can't get through there at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's bad. It's got to be opened up from a 2-lane to at least a 6-lane, meaning at least 2 on each side, and then some like a dirt pass on each side so they can get by if they have to. Now, a lot of us don't know if you don't drive it, and that's what you got to do. Now, a lot of the counties, as well as the cities, have the cameras in the intersections. Start looking at those cameras and look at the high traffic volume and everything. When I was coming down here today to this meeting, which I didn't know anything about, I was up at the Sun Valley outfit like you, talking to them. And they said to come down and talk to you about it. And I said, Okay, that's no problem. From the ARCO station at the base of Sun Valley all the way up, bumper to bumper, everybody was stopped dead, just waiting. The traffic is so horrible up here now. And that Highland Ranch Parkway is so bad, people can't get through. It took me 20 minutes to get from about the top of it down to Pyramid Highway. And I noticed that most of the people, when they were getting onto Pyramid, were going north into the new warehouse districts that were in front of me, is where I was just gonna go straight across and into Sparks, because I had a job out in Fallon to do for a trust company. And then the next day I went over there and it was so bad, I just turned around and went all the way down to the Spaghetti Bowl. But it's what everybody is saying in bits and pieces, but it's still basically the same thing too. If you watch Channel 2 News in the morning, they start about 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the traffic from the Spaghetti Bowl is backed up all the way.
Sir, I apologize, but public comment is only for 3 minutes.
Well, it should be a lot longer than that.
No, sir,
because you need
that's
to
our
answer
standard, that's our
everybody's
standard
problems.
is 3 minutes, sir.
See,
Thank you.
that's another failure too.
It's on our records.
Well,
Thank
it's
you, sir.
wrong record, simple as that, because
Thank
you
you,
need
sir.
to have the people talk so you know.
Thank you, sir.
And as
We're
well
done
as
for the
Ken-
evening.
and as
Thank
Ken
you,
was
sir.
saying, too, about the fees for the businesses, it should be based upon their income, not just somebody just making some crazy.
Ladies, do we have any other public comment at this time?
I have no further public comment in chambers.
Anything on Zoom?
I have nothing on Zoom.
All right, thank you. Then at that point, we close the public hearing and bringing it back to the commission. Is there any further discussion? If no discussion, I would enjoin a motion.
Commissioner Chesney?
Yes, Commissioner Chesney.
I'd like to make this motion, but I want to make sure that Ken Crater's comments are included in the minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to recommend the approval of WCBCC to adopt the 7th edition of the Regional Road Impact Fee, RRIF, General Administrative Manual, GAM, Capital Improvement Program, CIP, and revised fees. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report, information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Capital Improvement Advisory Committee, CIAC, recommends approval to adopt the 7th edition of the Regional Road Impact Fee, RRIF, in parens, General Administrative Manual, GAM, in parens, Capital Improvement Plan, CIP, in parens, and revised fees for unincorporated Washoe County to the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners, and authorizes the chair to sign the resolution on behalf of the CIC.
Thank you, Commissioner Chesney. Do we have a second from someone?
Commissioner Nelson, I'll second.
Commissioner Nelson seconds. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll go for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, that carries. And at this point, the Washoe County Planning Commission will reconvene solely as the Washoe County Planning Commission for the remainder of the meeting. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, on that. That being said, we're moving on to item 8B. Mr. Lloyd, if you would read that into the record, please.
Absolutely. This is an amendment of conditions, case number WAC 21-0005, the Truckee Meadows Water Authority. It's for hearing, discussion, and possible action to amend condition number 2 of special use permit, case number SW07017, and condition number 1 of variance case number VA 07021, in order to extend the expiration dates of these approvals from December 4, 2021 to December 4, 2023. The approved special use permit allowed the construction of a booster pump station facility to convey potable water through the Mogul area as authorized by Table 110-302-052 of the Washoe County Development Code. And the approved variance allowed for varied grading standards within the Washoe County Development Code, Section 110-438, 45B1 and 2, as those subsections existed in 2007, allowing for 2-to-1 slopes instead of 3-to-1 slopes, and allowing for fills higher than 48 inches within 50 feet of a shared property line, and to vary the front yard setback standards of Section 110-406-50B, allowing a retaining wall of up to 8 feet in height, approximately 8 feet from the front property line. The grading of the project approved in 2007 includes approximately 550 cubic yards of excavation, 400 cubic yards of exported material, and a retaining wall ranging from 3 feet to 8 feet in height. Representing Washoe County in this matter is Senior Planner Roger Pelham.
Thank you, Roger.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Again, Roger Pelham with Washoe County Planning. I'm not going to repeat all that again, so why don't we move forward? This is a request to amend essentially another 2 years onto a special use permit that was approved in 2007. This is, again, the use itself being a pump station, a number of standards that were varied, the grading, the landscaping, those sorts of things. This is located in the Mogul area as shown here on the vicinity map. That's I-80 there, sort of that big stripe across the middle. And then the subject site is there indicated. These are the plans that were submitted in 2007. I would note that no access is shown here. We have a gate, but we don't show any grading or improvements that would actually get a roadway there or a driveway. These are the cross sections that show how this building within which the pump station, the pumps would be located, is proposed to be sort of cut into a hillside. This one is unique. The approval in 2007 had a 2-year time extension. That is typical. State law tells us that special use permits and variances are good for 2 years unless otherwise specified. Then a 4-year, and just because of the way the dates fell, it was 2 years later, but really 3 years in terms of numbers there. In 2010, a 4-year extension was granted, and that is unusual. Generally speaking, it's the practice of staff to recommend approval of the first extension of time, generally for another 2 years, when progress is shown to have been made towards completion. That didn't occur. And then in 2014, at the end of that first extension, a 7-year extension was granted. I am not aware of another situation where an extension of that long of a time period has ever been granted. Most particularly not for a project, a physical project in the ground. Now, there are certain types of cases like tentative subdivision maps where if you do certain things, those can go on for literally decades. But this is totally unprecedented in my knowledge and understanding. No work of any kind has begun on this project. I want to emphasize that. What does that mean? For work to have begun on this project, for progress to have been made on this project, there's really only one metric, and that is, has there been a building permit applied for or issued? The answer is no. There are any number of changes that have taken place over the last 14 years that really sort of put this into a category where the applicant needs to resubmit, needs to come back. We need to look at this really in terms of the current code and the current situation versus the conditions as they may have existed 14 years ago. First, they would not be heard by this board. This was heard by a planning commission back then. These would now all be heard by the Board of Adjustment. Looking at the grading plans, the grading goes right up to the property line, literally to the fence line of the neighbor. Certainly we would not allow that. Now we now have grading setbacks. Grading steeper than 3 to 1. While that was required at the time, that was varied and is very unusual. And the reason for that is 3 to 1 slopes generally can revegetate and be stabilized on their own. Anything steeper than that requires mechanical stabilization like riprap, rocks placed there. Well, we no longer allow riprap slopes, but we did back then. Retaining walls within the front yard setback. Retaining walls, fences, perimeter planting, all fall under the same code. Those are limited to a maximum of 4.5 feet height within the front yard setback area. What I would like to note is that anything abutting a street or an easement is a front. So in this case, that's West 4th Street. Landscaping was totally waived. We now have far better standards for landscaping that go along with civic and commercial projects that really take into account sort of mitigating those, the effects more than anything else, the visual impact of projects of this type. And those were all waived back then. That might have been appropriate 14 years ago, but again, the area has changed substantially. And in fact, that's what we have here in this next one. I'm afraid this is a bit small, but what you can see in the upper, sort of the left-hand photo there is any number of areas that have been graded. There are a number of maps recorded. You can see those parcel lines. But of course, many of those didn't have dwellings, whereas now here on the right-hand side in 2019, many of those are built out. There are dozens, perhaps hundreds of more dwellings. What I will point out is this. The two houses directly on either side of this, that really hasn't changed. Okay, those are more or less the same way they were 14 years ago. But the overall area has changed. One of the things that has not been looked at in 14 years is what is the impact on the roadway and the conditions there. This is a relatively low impact in terms of the number, but is it appropriate to have a driveway in that location? West 4th Street is certainly busier now than it was then. I actually drove this here a few weeks ago when I went and did my site inspection. And there are any number of new projects a little bit further east on West 4th that would certainly put at least some traffic this direction. Again, just one of many changes that have taken place. This map shows the area in purple. That is under the jurisdiction of the city of Reno, and the yellow arrow there indicates this project site. What this points out is that we really don't have a whole lot of control, if you will, over the projects that let me rephrase that, the area that this project may serve. Okay. That being said, any number of other projects may have been approved in those areas. That's all well and good, but all of those other projects that may be served by this pump station are sort of out of our control. We don't really know when those come up. Again, those are all under a different jurisdiction. But what we do know is that progress, has not been made on this project. How do we know that? Again, we don't have any sort of a building permit or anything else that has happened in the last 14 years. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad project. I'm not saying it's a bad location. What I am saying is that it's inappropriate to extend for 14 years when we have no expectation that anything is going to be done. The applicant's requesting 2 additional years. Staff is recommending denial based on the inability to make the findings. Now, the overall evaluation, again, a new special use permit, possible variances to standards should be submitted. We can evaluate that based on the current code, the current situation, the current traffic, all of those things that have changed substantially over the last 14 years. There are several findings listed in your staff report. I did make a mistake. I said that this is, that the development code is part of the master plan. Technically, it is not. The development code implements the master plan. So I think it's still quite reasonable to say that this no longer conforms to the master plan, because those policies that are in the master plan that have been implemented by the grading code clearly are no longer met by the project as it was approved 14 years ago. This request was sent to 43 affected property owners at a distance of, I believe it's 500 feet as required by code and NRS. This went out to several reviewing agencies. No particular concerns were expressed. No new conditions of approval were recommended. Again, I've already talked about consistency. Does not comply with the grading code, again, which implements the master plan. And the improvements, we don't know whether the adequate improvements, roadway sanitation, water supply, drainage, we don't know. It's simply been too long and too many things have changed. Can no longer make that finding in the opinion of staff. Likewise, the variance, the subject site is essentially a very regular shape. It's not particularly sloped. There's a bit of a hill there, but there's nothing, there are no circumstances that rise to the level of a variance approval, in my opinion. And special privileges, this one's probably more important. Any other applicant who may have received approval of a variance would have their 2 years, possibly 4 with an extension. 14 is just unprecedented. And to go another 2 to 16, again, with no indication that there's going to be any project coming forward soon. So, with that, we have no comments that compel an approval. And again, this is really sort of outside of our, so far outside of our normal processes. The staff is recommending denial based upon the fact that we can no longer make all of the required findings. And with that, I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Roger. Any questions for Roger at this time? No
Question? Pat Phillips. I noticed that on page 4 of the report, Washoe County Water Rights did not respond. Are there any domestic wells in this area that will be affected by this?
This is a pump station, not a municipal well, so they won't be taking water out of the ground there.
Okay, basically, just a quick reminder, ladies and gentlemen, the only thing we're voting on here is an extension. We're not voting on any of the other conditions on here, just an extension. Okay? So are there any more questions for Roger at this time? All right, thank you. Is there a presentation from the applicant at this time?
Good evening, Danny Rotter for the record. I have some letters that are just physical copies of what I've emailed. I just want to make sure they're in the record and that you all get a copy.
We all have them, thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone wants a paper copy.
We all got them.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners and Zoom Commissioners. I can appreciate staff's comments on this being a unique project and an unprecedented request. It's because it is unique and is unprecedented. TUM was a government entity. We're not for profit. We serve the same constituents, whether they're in Washoe County or Reno in the Verdi area, and that this project will benefit, some of which being domestic well owners that would like to hook up to TUMWA's system, whether they have a failing well or a lowering water table. This will actually bring surface water to the whole area, which will benefit domestic well owners further out in the county. So I can appreciate staff careful consideration of this total duration. And I'd like to just point out that we're part of TUMWA's facility plan, the Verdi backbone facilities, including this pump station, which is then incorporated to the Regional Comprehensive Water Plan, which is also compliant with the master plan. So this has been decades in the making as part of our planning process. And you heard Commissioner Chesney earlier talking about infrastructure lagging growth. This is TUMO's attempt to stay ahead of that curve so that we're not lagging growth. I mentioned a lot of different things in the letter, and I don't want to go into very much detail here. I want to kind of summarize it for you. But we haven't sat idle. We haven't been waiting around for these things to occur, but we have been trying to prepare ourselves so that when RV park in Washoe County out in Verdi needs to connect because they have a failing water system, we'll be ready. When a 1,000+ home development in Reno comes along, we'll be ready. And so I put a number of bullet points in all the things that we've accomplished in the last 7 years in terms of taking over Washoe County's water utility, acquiring the Boomtown system, completing the Verdi water main extension. That represents about $6 million in the last 3 years alone, furthering the Verdi backbone facilities, which in total are another $17 million on top of this, including the tank special use permit, which is part of Reno, which is just above this site, but it's in Reno, that this pump station would take water from and then pump to the west. And as recently as last week, we got the Lucas easements for the tank and water mains that this pump station pumps to. And so it is unique in trying to be a regional water purveyor and continue to acquire rights and permits and plan for these things while not expending $25 million ahead of this growth, while trying to stay ahead of that curve. And so, in summary, we believe you can make the findings. They've been made twice before, and we believe you can make those again. And we believe they're warranted because it is in the benefit of the public of Washoe County constituents. And so there's a lot here in this letter. I don't want to go all through it, but I appreciate the consideration. And I also just want to briefly kind of to the side, appreciate all the commissioners and what you do and the various comments you hear and items you see. Just from a personal level, I was the city engineer and saw planning commission at Carson City for a long time, and I sat there and saw different things. So I just want to say thanks personally. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, give it back to you, public comment, whatever you'd like to do.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners for the applicant?
Commissioner Chesney has a question.
Yes, Commissioner Chesney.
Should this motion be made to approve an extension, what is your intention? When are you going to take out a permit? When are you going to quit messing around and build this thing? You're going to come back in 2 years and ask for another extension? We've got some really good points here that everything is so antiquated in the conditions that it really does need a review and an update. So you guys getting ready to break ground in the next 6 months, or what's going on?
Well, I just briefly would point out again, I haven't been messing around. I've been doing a lot of work. I've been at TUMO about 5 years, and almost the bulk of my work, other than a Mount Rose treatment plant, has been on the Verdi area. And so I've been in talks with a number of different developers in preparing for this. I believe that property will close, and January 1st, you will see a flurry of designs and submittals. I don't have a plan to submit this in the next 6 months. I would say it would be in the next year, but certainly in the next 2 years. I don't plan on being here in 2 years.
Thank you.
That answers your question.
Thank you, Commissioner Chesney. Any other commissioners' questions at this time?
Chair Donchak.
Yes.
Chair Donchak. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a couple questions on your letter. You talked about how there were a couple litigation situations that happened. Is that, did that delay the project 1 year, 2 years, 10 years? I mean, that type of situation could delay it quite a bit.
Yeah, so specifically, I think you're talking about the Meridian 120 South and the Lucas project.
Correct.
I started in late 2016, early 2017, and at that time, Meridian 120 North told me they were 18 months away. And so that was when we started working on the Boomtown water acquisition and preparing and getting a lot of those things in place, including the new tank up above Boomtown. And those projects, being back and forth between the appeal and the litigation and back in front of the council and those sorts of things, did delay it because we were right on the tails of the Boomtown acquisition talking about these things. Okay, we need the Verdi pump station, we need the US 40 tank, we need the Lucas tank. And then here we are 3 years later, still those two are now stalled, but the other one is going. And then add in a couple RV parks and other things that are ready to go too. So yes, I believe that has been a big part of trying to get ready for this, but then still waiting.
And then you've got the bullet points of all the projects that have been completed. Would you say that any of these projects were done in preparation for this pump station?
Yes,
Or are they
almost,
just part of the Verdi backbone project as a whole?
Yeah, so this is kind of, up until this point, has been kind of the groundwork for the Verdi backbone facilities. To kind of put it in perspective of roads, we have surface streets to Verdi right now. We need a regional water infrastructure to get more water to Verdi to serve this growth. So putting the pipes in place, getting under the river, connecting to Boomtown, having Boomtown as part of the portfolio, all has been laying that groundwork to then build tanks, pipes, pump stations of a greater capacity to get more surface water to Verdi.
And did this pump station get put on the back burner because some of the other infrastructure needed to be done first? Or, I know you weren't there when this pump station first came to the commission for approval, but was it one of those situations where we think we're going in direction A, but then all of a sudden we have to go in direction C?
Yeah, I wasn't there, but as I understand it, this was kind of one of the key pieces to get secured from a land standpoint. And so it was one of the first things to move forward in terms of entitlements and those sorts of things. The tank was the next piece, because you have to have a pump set, you have to be able to pump to a tank. And then that developer, and then the recession shortly after that, as I understand it.
Okay. I think those are all my questions for now.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Nelson. I think Commissioner Flick, I think you had a question or something that you wanted? Oh, no. He says no, thank you. Any other questions from the commission at this time?
Yes, Chair, Chair Donchek.
Yes, Vice Chair Jabilczyk.
And I don't know if this is for the applicant or staff, but, and I'm just asking for some clarity and making sure that we are looking at, that we're applying the same set of rules to everyone. So earlier, we heard an extension and for the doggy daycare, and new conditions were added to that extension because the regulations had changed, air quality, yada, yada, yada. So my question is, and I know this is a different type of project, but why would it not, if there's a request for an extension, why would we not add the additional conditions to bring it to current code?
Good evening. For the record, Roger Pelham with Washoe County Planning. It is a very different type of situation. The previous project was essentially approved under the code we have now. The three conditions, as I heard them while I was sitting in this audience this evening, are really merely clarifications to code as it exists today. More courtesy than substantive. The difference here is we have substantial differences between not only the code as it existed 14 years ago, but in fact the standards that were also waived 14 years ago, and the the codes, the standards that we have available to us today. It would be a fairly large difference that would require really a new set of plans. It's not our position to sort of to design a project for the applicant, but rather to simply evaluate what they bring forward. What they brought forward was evaluated against, if you will, a yardstick that's now 14 years old and has changed in any number of ways. I hope that gets to your question.
Somewhat, but then since this is a request for an extension, and then if we were to approve this, then would the next set of code requirements come into play once the project was started to be developed?
No, they would not. This would be compared with the plans as they were submitted 14 years ago, not with current code.
So that concerns me that it's not a new project, but it would be being built, say, in 2022. And so the same code from 14 years ago would be applied to a project that starts in 2022?
Yes. And this comes down to a basic principle, and I'm looking at my district attorney here, that you can't change the goalpost once the game is going on. So they submitted in 2007. They submitted under that set of codes, under those regulations, and they obtained an approval. Okay? If you extend their approval, you are extending that approval based upon the application as it was evaluated in 2007, not based upon the standards that we would apply to a new project as it may be submitted in 2021 or 2022.
Okay, so if you could indulge me, and again, I'm just trying to understand to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence as a planning commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a moment about our zombie developments that have been languishing much longer than this project. And if I remember correctly, we have been told that once that project were to break ground or to start, then the new codes and new requirements would be applied to that initial application. Is that correct?
Not exactly. And this is going to get into some nuance here, and I apologize for that. The first thing we have to do is we have to look at not projects as one thing. We call them projects, and they are, but a project can be any one of a number of different types of applications and approvals. We have tentative subdivision maps, and those are the ones that, as I stated earlier, we have some that are decades old and are still valid because they've done certain things over that 10 or 20 or 30-year time period. But the number of lots, the lot layout, the roadways, all of that was essentially approved when the subdivision was approved. On the other hand, when they get a building permit for an individual dwelling, yeah, you don't get to build to a 1990 standard when you're building in 2020, but rather you're, for lack of a better example, the plugs in the wall are of a different type. Perhaps the amount of water is different. The hoses might be bigger. The lines, I should say, might be larger or smaller. There might be a different kind of fire rating in between the garage and the dwelling. So in terms of building standards, certainly a dwelling built today is built to today's standards. even though the tentative subdivision map under which it might have been approved might be held to the standards from 20 or 30 years ago when it was approved. This is a different thing. It is a project, certainly, but it's a special use permit. And essentially give me one moment. The approval is for a facility. That facility has certain characteristics. This particular facility didn't meet code at that time, and they also got a variance to go along with it. Because that was approved, when this facility comes in, it will be held to the standard, the yardstick of the application as it was submitted and evaluated in 2007. Am I speaking in circles? If so, I apologize.
No, I'm just, no, thank you for that clarification. So again, this would go to both of you, I think. When the request for extension of this special use permit, what was the conversation between the applicant and the staff to say, how can we come to a consensus here? Because when we were doing the regional plan update and I, represented Washoe County as a Washoe County Planning Commissioner to the RPC, one of the things that was drilled into our heads regularly was we need to get better about planning out, meaning we're putting infrastructure in place, which includes water lines and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because if we do that at this dollar versus when the projects get built, it's an inflated dollar. Now, the current conditions are, it's probably, it's grossly more expensive now, but so it feels like sometimes that we might be penalizing an entity who is trying to plan forward.
I can understand that position, and I certainly understand trying to plan out ahead and having some idea what you need to do at a certain time period in the future. I can certainly understand some situations, external situations affecting that. And I think that we've really accommodated that in the 2 years allowed by state law, unless otherwise specified, and then the first extension, and then the second extension. I don't think that the economic argument is going to really come into this particular instance very much, because the facility is being built now and it's going to cost the number of dollars it's going to cost regardless. I think the position that the county is taking is this facility needs to be evaluated based on our current standards. Also going into that economic argument, the applicant is not required to pay application fees. They didn't pay for the original SUP. They didn't pay for the extensions. They didn't pay for this hearing this evening. This is all done as, one governmental entity, essentially as a courtesy to another. So, I guess I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and just one last thing. I am deeply concerned about the level of grading that accompanies this project, and it's not going to be done to current standards. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Commissioner Shilachek. At this point, go ahead, Roger.
I apologize. I remember the other thing that I wanted to say, and this addresses something Commissioner Shilachek said. What was the conversation between county staff and TUMWA staff? And that conversation really was, wow, this is really old. We need to evaluate this under current standards. Why don't you just come in with a new application? We'll take it through the process. We'll evaluate against current codes, and we'll go forward that way. That would have been done on this exact same timeline. That we would be here looking at a new set of plans versus debating current code in 2021 versus 2007. So I said then it was unlikely for an approval to be recommended by staff, and my recommendation was simply submit a new SUP. So I knew there was something else. Sorry that left the brain for a moment.
Thank you, Roger. At this point, are there any more questions for either Roger or the applicant? Yes, Commissioner Flick.
Yes, this is for Roger. So as I understand it now, the grading issue is really the only thing that's in violation of today's code and standards?
The grading and
So the 2-to-1
the
slopes
landscape.
versus a 3-to-1.
That is one example. There are several others.
There are several more. Okay.
Yes. The
Related to
height-
grading?
Related to
project.
grading and landscaping
Okay, all right.
primarily. Well, and access. Again, the driveway wasn't shown on the plans.
Okay.
Thank you, Roger. Any other questions from the commission? If not, I bring it back. Just, ladies, is there any public comment on this? Oh, yes, sorry. Applicant has addressed.
Danny Rotter again for the record. I just wanted to follow up and make sure I clarified some things. The special use to Commissioner Chivilicek's comments, as I understand it, and kind of summarizing Roger, the existence of a pump station requires the special use permit. The variance is probably the biggest thing at hand here in terms of the grading and setbacks and retaining walls and so forth. And I would just comment that Tumwa acquired that easement with those constraints and under those circumstances, and we couldn't meet those codes today. So any new application would be constrained. Our easement is constrained on that site. And so just for your consideration to comment and clarify that, that's why we went forward with saying, we have what we have. We have an easement. It's a tight site. It's a tough site. It's a weird site. Homes up to a drainage, up to a hill, up to a frontage road owned by NDOT. And so those are just some final comments. If there's any other questions, I'd answer those.
Chair Domtic, I have a follow-up on that.
Yes, Commissioner Nelson.
So it seems like there's a big sticking point about not showing a driveway. Was that an oversight on the designer's point, or how do you plan to get into the site?
I think the grading was considered. However, I think there was still some NDOT issues to handle.
Have you
And
gone
we're-
through the encroachment right-of-way process with NDOT yet?
We are currently in that process now to include pipelines all the way back along 4th Street, under the freeway, along the Mogul Church there, around further out to Somerset, and then along US 40, old US 40.
And does the access to this site, is that included in that NDOT encroachment permit application?
It will be.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Any other questions from the commission for either the staff or the applicant? Hearing none, I would just like to find out if there's any public comment at this time, either Zoom or in-house.
Yes, we have.
Yes, sir, if you do, please make sure you fill out a form for this agenda item.
We can assist you with that, sir. Absolutely.
If that stuff is printed up there, I guess you guys believe in it, right?
Please remember to state that your name for the record, sir, again. Thank you.
You want my name again?
Yes, sir, we need it every
Sean
time you speak.
Wensley,
Thank you.
local licensed handyman. Got all my licenses. Anyway, when it comes to the COVID thing, just based upon like that up there, we have a lot of information. I'm not going to flood you with it because you've probably even got more than what I ever have. But I talked to my doctor before the stuff ever
Sir,
happened.
may I ask, are you speaking on this agenda item? Because that's what this public comment's for, just on this item.
Just on the COVID thing.
No, I mean, in regards to this, the Tumwa item that we're speaking to. That's what the public comment at this time is for, specifically for this item. If you want to do generalized public comment, you have to wait until the end of the meeting, sir, if that's what
Which
you're.
is how long?
We don't know until we're finished, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Ladies, is there any other public comment?
I have no public comment in chambers.
And I have none via Zoom.
Thank you. Hearing that, we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the board to find out if there's any more questions or discussion. And if there isn't, I would adjourn a motion.
Madam Chair, I want to make a personal observation. This is Commissioner Chesney.
Yes, Commissioner Chesney.
If we approve this extension, we're approving an extension for a non-conforming facility. And so I think that we all need to keep that in mind. And that's the end of my comment, and I'd also be prepared to make a motion.
Commissioner Chesney, if you'd like to make a motion.
I do. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission deny amendment of condition case number WAC 210005 for Truckee Meadows Water Authority no longer being able to make all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.804.25.
Second.
Larry, could you be specific on the findings that you have a problem with, sir, for the record?
Sure. We don't have adequate utilities in road, condition B, condition C, and condition D.
Thank you. Commissioner Payton, excuse me, Commissioner Nelson, do you agree with that amended, with those conditions?
I do not.
Okay.
I think we need to approve this. Coming from a municipal background, I understand the time it takes to get some of these projects moving forward. We need to keep in mind that this is a regional system, and that although a lot of the projects noted were not in the Washoe County area, it is benefiting the regional system. This property happens to be in Washoe County, and that's why we're seeing it, but it is serving the entire area in that area. In looking at the map from 2007 to 2019, you can tell that the development adjacent to this parcel has not changed, and I'd be willing to bet that there are some retaining walls and some slopes that are 2 to 1 and that kind of thing. I don't have heartburn over any of the varianced items. It is a tight site, and that's what you have to do when you're a municipality. You can't take the best parcels and the easiest ones to develop and use those. So I fully agree with Tumla that we are gonna see this back in front of us as another special use permit with the exact same drawings and the exact same variance requests, but that's all I have to say.
I apologize. I was asking for a second for the motion and then discussion.
That's my discussion.
Sorry. So was there would you, Commissioner Flick, would you would you speak into the mic, please? You said you were seconding the denial?
Yes.
Would you speak into the mic, please?
I second the motion.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, we got a little out of order. We have a motion to deny. We have a first and a second. Commissioner Nelson has a discussion. Is there any further discussion on this before we vote?
Chair Donchek.
Yes, Vice Chair Spalchek.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is for council or the director or the applicant or the county staff. So to the commissioner's comment to approve and saying that, and what the applicant said is that this project, he expects to be putting forward a special use permit and then we would be seeing this again. So can someone speak to that the probability of that happening?
Through the chair. Madam Commissioner, well, first of all, this would not be heard again by this board. It would go to the Board of Adjustment.
That's what I thought, yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a count. All those in favor of the denial?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So we have a
I recommend you do a roll call vote.
roll, okay, ladies, if we could get a roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Chesney,
Aye.
Commissioner Savilichek,
Nay.
Commissioner Donchik,
Aye.
Commissioner Flick,
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson,
Nay.
Commissioner Payton is absent, Commissioner Phillips.
A. Yay.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Your mask, sorry.
The ayes have the majority.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. What was the final, was it?
We have 4 in favor of, 2 against, and 1 absent.
So the denial passes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. At this point, we are finished with our basic agenda. We're moving on to item 9, chair and commission items. First item on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, is any future agenda items? Does the commission have any future agenda items they would like to request at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on to item B.
I'm sorry, Chair Donchek.
Yes,
I was
Chair.
trying to figure out how I was wanting to.
Right,
move.
I'm sorry, okay.
In terms of, as we're going through the Washoe County update, it would be, I think it would be beneficial to the commission and it would be beneficial to the public that we, and I don't know how often this happens, but that maybe we have a standing item for updates as they develop.
Thank you, Commissioner
Sorry, and through the
Shabilchek.
chair,
Do
just
you
for
have a clarification? Yes, Trevor.
Just for clarification, may I ask Commissioner Chavilacek, a standing item, are you talking a monthly, maybe bi-monthly, quarterly? What do you think?
I would defer to staff as to what you think is most reasonable. And, you know, full disclosure, I did communicate with planning staff because I had made 2 requests for commissioners to receive links to the website and on opportunities for us to engage on this plan update. And as I was hearing from people, it seems like we have fits and starts with this. And I was under the impression that more was happening and that I was feeling like I was being left in the dark. But it turns out that maybe more has not been happening and it is a fits and starts kind of thing. But just a simple thing, we're progressing, here's where we are to date. Or now that we have access to the website now, we can see the timeline and such. But again, just indulge me. I just went through the regional plan update and, you know, another fellow commissioner did the same thing and it was a huge undertaking. So
We can certainly accommodate that request. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other future agenda items? Okay. Next item, moving on to item B, and I just have a request, kind of a thing that I've mentioned in the past. I tend to get all the Reno City Council notifications and agendas for their meetings. I do not get them for the BCC. I have to go hunting to try and remember when BCC meetings are happening or what's on the agenda. And I would like to see all of the Planning Commission automatically get all the BCC meeting notifications with the agendas and everything on it, so they can stay on top of what the BCC is doing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will certainly make that request to the manager's office.
Okay, any other requests from staff? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 10, directors and legal counsel items. So Trevor, or do you have any report on any commission items at this time?
Yes, I do. Just one. You may remember the Village Green Master Plan Amendment that went forward to the County Commission last week. There was a modification that was requested, and as a result, it will require a report to come before this Planning Commission, and then it'll go back to the County Commission. So that's the latest with the Village Green Master Plan Amendment. That's all I have.
Ms. Gustafson, anything from legal counsel at this time?
Nothing from legal.
Thank you very much. At this point in time, we are opening up to public comment, and just for the record again, comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the agenda. However, action may not be taken on any matter raised during this public comment period until the matter is specifically listed on an agenda as an action item. Comments are to be made to the Planning Commission as a whole. So do we have any public comment, ladies?
We have Sean Wensley.
Yeah. When it comes to the COVID stuff, we've all been flooded by all this information and so forth. But the media, as we all know, has been lying to us about a lot of different things. I just heard last week for the first time that Britain has got testing before you get the shot. Why haven't we had it here in the States? What I'm thinking is this, is I'm not blaming anybody here. It's got nothing to do with anybody here. But what we could do, we could be the safest county in the state and maybe even the United States if we do things right. Little common sense approach type thing. Now, I've never had the shot. I'll never get the shot because, number one, with all the information out there, they're not giving us the stuff we need to know. Like, I heard where people got the first shot, the second shot, the booster shot or whatever, and died from it. Of course, they never told us where and when, but I know one person died here in the last month or so from a shot. I'm not going to question any of that, but the thing is, what we should say is, why don't they get the testing first before you get the shot? Myself, I had open heart surgery. I had my gallbladder removed and everything. I've been taking the medication and so forth. I did a lot of vitamins before all of this stuff happened. And I've been to my doctor 4 times in the last year. I'm perfectly healthy, yet I was around 8 people that had it. I'm still perfectly fine from it. Did a lot of the different vitamins. You got the men's vitamins, you got the women's vitamins. Plus I read up some other stuff too about the nitric oxide and the vitamin D3 that helps the COVID thing. And eating properly, not drinking a lot, just all the basic common sense stuff. And staying away, you know, and I've stayed away from more people here from the distance than any other place. But I've been in all the hot zones too, Home Depot, grocery stores, Walmart, Kmart, whatever, you know. But I've been fine and everything. And when my doctor checked me out, he says, you don't need any shot. You don't need a flu shot, a COVID shot, anything like that because you're perfectly fine. That's good to know. And the one thing is, what you got to do is you go to the doctor, but before you go to the doctor, you tell him you want a blood test for all your vitamins and all that stuff, and then you get it done. And I've had it 4 times in the last year with the blood test and everything. He says, you're perfectly fine. You're healthier than a 40-year-old guy, and I'm over 65. And yet I can do just about anything outside that I want. I'm a non-smoker, just a casual drinker and everything. And I've got all types of people, from street people all the way up to multi-millionaires I work for. And so I've been all over the place with things. But I'm just putting this out so that people get the proper information, because the media should be telling us, just like with all these cops supposedly shooting people, it's not the police. We've got great police here. There's no problem with our police. But one thing that happened to me, I left my place up in Sun Valley at 9 o'clock in the morning, drove down by Sparks City Hall.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, but your 3 minutes are up for the evening.
Well, the thing is, that's not long enough. It should be long.
That is the legal standard. I apologize, sir, but we're done. Thank you. It's documented, sir, on our website and in our agendas. Thank you. Any other public comment, ladies?
Madam
Yes.
Madam Chair, before we adjourn, I just wanted to make one announcement. You may have noticed that there's an extra person sitting in near the dais here.
Yes.
I just wanted to introduce our newest staff member. Her name is Adriana Albaran. I hope I didn't get that wrong, and she will be an excellent addition to our team here.
Welcome, Adriana. Thank you.
And just for the
Chair
record,
Hope we didn't scare you too much tonight.
Chair Donchek, neither myself or Commissioner Chesney can see her, so welcome.
Lucky her.
Yeah. Okay.
Chair
Seeing-
Donchik, if I may, just for the record,
Of
there
course.
was no further public comment.
Thank you. Hearing that there is no more public comment, I will join a motion for adjournment.
Chesney, move to adjourn.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for your evening.